Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is a series that I don't think needs much introduction. Coming out in 2009 with 64 episodes and animated by the one and only Studio Bones, it basically blew every other anime that came out around that time out of the water. And after it finished airing, it would quickly become one of the most highly praised anime of all time. And even to this day, is still very highly rated among anime fans, being the highest rated anime on IMDb and My Anime List, or shall I say was the highest rated on My Anime List. It's also a very popular anime, and I assume most of you watching have already seen the show before, or are at least somewhat familiar with it. But for those just getting into anime or haven't seen the show yet, may be wondering just what about the show has gotten it so much praise and attention. And to really answer that question, there's a multitude of reasons. Fullmetal Alchemist started off as a manga in 2001 and would get its first anime adaptation in 2003. Now, I'm not really going to be talking about this version much in this video, since I'm mainly going to focus on Brotherhood, which will come out 6 years later, also because I never finished watching it. But from what I saw, it felt like it had a much darker tone and it was full of anime original content. Anyways, looking at Brotherhood specifically and why I think it became so popular and critically acclaimed, we must look at the plot of the series itself. As most of you watching probably know by now, FMAB is about two brothers named Edward and Alphonse Elric. Years prior to the main story, they tried to bring their mother back to life by doing what's called a transmutation, but the result of this would cause Edward to lose one of his arms and Alphonse to lose his entire body. This is due to what's called equivalent exchange, which is a key component to the show's power system. I'll talk about it more later on since it is a major theme throughout the show. But back to the story, Alphonse's spirit would eventually get transferred into a suit of armor, and now in the present, the two's main goal is to get what's called the Philosopher's Stone, which will help get their bodies back to normal. But on this quest, there arise multiple different challenges, with stakes getting higher and higher and the appearance of new enemies. The journey to their goal becomes a lot more difficult, and this is basically the main plot that the show establishes within the first few episodes. Now, for me personally, this setup immediately hooked me into the show. I thought it had a very unique concept and offered a lot of potential, and the way the show would continue to execute that did not disappoint, introducing us to more characters like Roy and Riza, two very memorable characters, and I absolutely love their dynamic. Not to mention they're both badasses, especially Roy. Also really do like some of the other military members like Armstrong and Hughes. And outside of the military, you got a few other cool characters like Winry, who is Ed and Al's childhood friend, and she's also their mechanic. There's Scar, who starts off as a reoccurring antagonist but eventually becomes a sort of anti-hero and helps a lot later on. He also has an interesting backstory which ties heavily into his theme of revenge. Then you've got Ling, who I wasn't too crazy about at first, but as the show progressed he slowly became one of my favorite characters. And of course, another character I have to mention is Ed and Al's father, Hohenheim, who becomes a very crucial part of the story later on, especially as it relates to the antagonists. Speaking of which, the antagonists really helped pique my interest of the show during the earlier parts, and I'm specifically talking about the homunculi, man-made beings who have superhuman strength and are easily able to regenerate their bodies. There's 7 in total, each based around the 7 deadly sins, and each of them have their own distinct abilities. There's also a lot of mystery surrounding them, particularly when it comes to where they came from and just what their goal is. Now, granted, they aren't the only antagonists in the show, and there definitely are a few other great ones, but they're definitely the most important since they reoccur the most, and a lot of the plot twists within the story center around them. Overall, making the series have one of the best group of antagonists in shonen, and really just one of the best casts as a whole. Now, I know I spent most of this video talking about the characters, but there are more things that I think allowed this show to get its status, starting with the action. Like I mentioned in my Soul Eater video from a couple years ago, if you know Studio Bones, you know how good they are with fight scenes. And FMAB is probably the clearest example of that. The choreography looks absolutely stunning, with the characters having some of the smoothest movements I've seen. I mean, just look at this. The animation from these fights and really the show as a whole has aged so well, especially since it used a lot of impact frames, which you look at a lot of action anime now, they're pretty much everywhere. Another thing I love about the fights is how well they showcase the alchemy power system, with each character having their own unique way of fighting and utilizing alchemy. Alchemy is an interesting power system. I talked about it in a previous video already, and I mentioned that in my opinion, it's one of the best power systems in shonen. It's a lot more based in reality and it offers some really cool abilities. But the main thing I had brought up was was how well it ties itself to the main themes of the story. Alchemy is pretty widely used in the world of this series, but with that there comes people who use it for more unethical things, as we can see this demonstrated very early on, and multiple other times throughout the anime. You've also got equivalent exchange, which I mentioned earlier. In order to gain something, you must lose something, and we see this with the main characters Edward and Al. By giving up an arm and leg, Edward was able to gain his alchemy abilities. This idea of equivalent exchange ends up becoming a huge part of their character arcs, especially when it comes to achieving their main goal. Overall, I still think alchemy is an amazing power system. Its execution managed to keep me invested in it, as well as its use in the show's battles, and I'm sure at least some of y'all can say the same. One last major thing I think really contributed to the series' success was just how well written and well rounded the story actually is. In terms of quality, FMAB has one of the most consistently good stories out there. For me personally, there was never really a point where I thought the story dragged or really had any low points in its writing. It just felt like a smooth journey all the way through, and the peaks in this show made it all the more better. The story has some amazing plot twists and does great with build up. It also has some pretty top tier world building, being rich with lore and having very diverse location designs. Genuinely some of the best world building shonen has to offer. And I know I already talked about the fights as well as the characters, but I feel like it's important to come back to them as it pertains to this point. This show has some of my favorite anime fights, like Scar vs King Bradley vs Ling, both fights, Al vs Kimberly and Pride, and of course Roy Mustang vs Envy, which not only has one of the best anime rage moments, but also has a very satisfying outcome. Speaking of satisfying outcomes, for the most part, every character has a satisfying conclusion. I think when it comes to writing characters, their conclusion is one of the most important aspects, since it's the last bit of development for their character and the character arc as a whole, and this anime does a very solid job at handling this. Again, using Edward and Al as an example, after seeing them fight for so long and make it so far into their journey, it was so satisfying to see them reach their goal and finally be at peace, giving us one of the best endings I've seen to any anime out there. Now, moving everything else to the side, there is still one more thing that I think really helped this series gain popularity. I know I said the last one was the last major thing, but I almost forgot to talk about the soundtrack. This series OST is genuinely top tier. You've got a good mix of intense and heavy hitting tracks with a lot slower and more somber sounding tracks, with Trisha's Lullaby probably being my favorite song out of the whole soundtrack. It's damn near perfect. Oh, and don't even get me started on the openings and endings. FMAB is one of the rare cases of a long running show having all its openings be straight bangers. They genuinely went 5 for 5. All of them are so good that I struggle to pick which one's my favorite all the time. I may say opening 2 is my favorite one day, then in the next I might just switch it to opening 5. The endings are fire as well, with the first one genuinely being top 5 anime ending songs, at least for me personally. Overall, looking at FMAB and all the reasons I listed, it starts to make sense as to why it's so highly praised. Similar to Frieren, while I don't think it's the greatest anime ever, I still respect its status and reputation in the anime community, and as a whole, I think it's truly one of the best anime series of all time. But with that being said, I'm gonna end the video here. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I know I haven't uploaded in a minute, but I've got a few videos planned for the next couple of months, so stay tuned if you're interested. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.